of owning a cafe and other heroic deeds by Bewed Tisterel. Chapter 71, Operation Treat Cat Dad, Part 2. The rest of the week blessedly went by without a hitch.
Hey, Sho, would you mind picking me up some katsu rice crackers while you're out, please?
Tuesday saw Hitoshi back in school and the teens and Tomoko diligently working in the cafe alongside him, and the customers, as ever, were always hungry. Both his teens were becoming proficient in the basics. Dabi had a real flair for bread kneading, whilst Tomura was fascinated by the chemistry involved in making soup bases and sauces.
Yeah, sure. Is there anything else you need?
Wednesday, similarly, was blessedly normal. The MU students, high schoolers, and middle schoolers, their grueling mid-year exams out of the way, were coming by now just to relax, fuss over the cats, play in the gaming area, and enjoying themselves. A few of the middle schoolers had developed a friendly rivalry with his teens. They'd be running tournaments over the summer.
Actually, I think Hitoshi said something about needing some more coloring pens. I could do with the new set too, if that's okay.
Thursday, however, it did give them all a bit of a scare. Fujita Sora, now just past the 8th-month mark, had been happily chatting with Mimi-chan and her girls in the knitting nook when she started having contractions. The paramedics had come, her husband had been called, and after pensively waiting for a few hours, Fujita Dai, his tone elated, rang as he proudly told them that they'd had a little girl.
Sora-chan was incredible, Aizawa-san. Could you please let our grandmothers and her friends know that they're both just fine? We'd love to bring her by next week to meet you all. We're calling it Kohana, Fujita Kohana,
who at 6 pounds and 8 ounces was healthy, well, and fine to go home. Small mercies.
Well, of course it is. Just text me what brand you want, alright? You know I don't have a clue about such things.
And now Friday was here again. He'd waved Toshi, Katsuki, and Izuku off to school that morning, the three of them wearing their All Might t-shirts and sharing sneaky glances and giggles. It was so good to see them happy, and gone about his day quite normally. Mirai had called him at 9:12 to confirm that he and his teens had an appointment booked with a family law specialist on Wednesday at 12. Namori and Tomoko wonderfully had offered to cover for them, which had meant that the cafe stayed open whilst Toshi would hang out with Izuku in the cat enclosure. They were such good friends, weren't they? Similarly, he'd had a few texts off of his care center siblings, as they were all coming by tomorrow and planning to stay over the night. They'd all sent photos of their sleeping bags and told him not to go overboard in preparing for their visit. They'd be spending the weekend together. He'd close the Noroneko tonight and reopen on Monday, and chuckled at their food and movie requests. Considering that he wasn't supposed to make a fuss of them, they'd all asked for snacks that he didn't have in and were too fiddly to make himself. However, since they'd all be heading off again on Sunday afternoon, going to the shops to grab them what they wanted was a small price to pay, wasn't it? Tomoko and his teens had already proven that they could handle everything, and since his oldest little brothers wouldn't be able to visit as often, and probably not altogether again, like this for a while, he wanted this weekend to be special, even if that was just keeping his precious people close and maybe going out for a day trip somewhere before he went on his date with Obaro on Sunday evening.
Yeah, I will. Thanks, and take your time, alright?
Blinking, he regarded Dabi, both of them in the main living room. He cocked his head to the side. Dabi was still teasing him about his befuddlement over All Might. Luckily, the man hadn't come by all week, and he'd successfully texted him without his head imploding. Also, there'd have been no mention of innuendos in their group chats either. Thank God.
You,
he said, his right brow arching wryly,
are up to something, aren't you?
Oh, me? The younger man grinned from where he was sat at the desktop computer updating their website. No.
Uh-huh,
he hummed, his keys and wallet in hand.
Well, I guess I'll be off then,
he said before with a snicker.
Seriously, if you and your partner just wanted the apartment yourselves to make out in, then...
Oh, darn! You're so embarrassing! The younger tittered, his tone filled with mock affront as he met that snicker with a leer.
That's what closed doors are for anyway, and hey, you want some pointers from when you and the big guy decide to finally stop dancing around each other, then...
What? He squeaked, his face burning.
You may have won the battle, son, but the war is far from over.
He sputtered before turning around and retreating to the stairway whilst his oldest lodger, soon-to-be ward, continued to cackle like a banshee as he jogged his way down to the cafe. He should have known better than to have started this kind of silly embarrassment challenge thing against Dabby of all people, but he enjoyed their banter, and hey, seeing the young man laugh and joke around was one of his favorite things, so what was the harm? Then, sweeping his eyes around the kitchen, clean and tidy, he looked over to the rice cookers, which were fine, checked his stock of condiments, he needed more dark soy sauce, and sighed. Everything was looking great, things couldn't be better. Sometimes he couldn't quite believe it, really. But still, he learned long ago to never take anything for granted. He knew that taking every day as it can, hoping for the best, and preparing for the worst, was the right way to live. Therefore, after another swift look around, he walked into the service bar and smiled as Tomoko, ever the kidder, gave him a jaunty salute. "Everything is running fine, boss," she chirped. "Ooh, could you do me a favor and pick me up a few things since you're heading out?" She asked, her amber eyes glistening as Tomura's cleaning supplies in hand made his approach through the mostly quiet eatery. Some of the late-night workers were slumped in chairs, eagerly chugging coffee and gobbling up formerly rabbit-eared cupcakes, and some older men, who'd started coming by to play mahjong, were sat in a booth sipping iced tea and amicably bickering about the latest thing they'd seen on the news.
Sure thing.
He smiled, his eyes slipping to the older teen who had been side-eyeing him and tapping away on his phone. Namori, happily chatting with some customers lounging outside under the parasols, the pro refilling their lemonade glasses, had also just grabbed at her smart device.
Could I get you anything, Tomura?
Yeah. I really like that salty licorice you gave me a taste of the other day.
Really? He thought. So that's why you made a face when you ate it, huh? Suspicious.
Could you get me a box, please?
Of course I can.
He nodded before they blinked. Tomoko was literally in his face, a handwritten list held up next to her Cheshire Cat smile.
"And here's the yen for it, too,"
she told him, his eyebrow lifting as she pressed a small brown envelope to his chest.
"You're a doll. Thank you."
Walking down the street, and already regretting his choice to head out into the summer's oppressive heat, Shouta was glad that he'd shoved his hair up and out of the way as he tried to walk under whatever shadows he could find. This was why he ordered all of his stock, including what other food or drink items that his boys needed or wanted, online, wasn't it? However, he supposed that going to an actual supermarket wouldn't kill him, would it? Sighing, his eyes casually looking around at the local high street, he tried to remember what this part of Musutavu had looked like when he was young. He was pretty sure it was the same, if a little cleaner. There had been new trees planted on the sidewalk, a few extra benches dotted the cement walkways, and all of the vending machines were well maintained and full. It was surprising, really, what could change over a decade, wasn't it? And yet, as he turned the next corner and saw the bigger supermarket he could buy most of his items from, he couldn't help but wonder what more could be done. There were many, too many, run-down shops, boarded-up windows, and dingy areas around here, weren't there? Not that he'd ever have the funds or the means to tidy up the whole place, but it was worth thinking about how he and his community could spread out from the Noroneko. One of these older office blocks could be a gaming HQ for his teen's business. That bigger glass-fronted property would make a fine dojo for Takeo. Seiji, too, could potentially open up a physiotherapy clinic here. Thoughts for the future. Regarding his shopping cart, his voice humming along to the catchy tune piping through the supermarket's tannoy, Shouta regarded the shelves dispassionately until, quite coincidentally, he found himself in the luxury food aisle. Oh. Out of all of his guilty pleasures, hunting for bargains in these fancy Western and European imports was something he tried his best to avoid. He'd picked his cafe stockists carefully and ruled his larder with an iron fist because, if he wasn't in control, he'd soon be selecting all kinds of things to try, for although the biggest comfort he derived from cooking came from the chemistry, the logic of weight ingredients combined with techniques and usually heat, he couldn't deny his culinary curiosity. Experimenting with flavors, tastes, textures, and exotic wares was a small irrational part of himself that he allowed, and thanks to Mirai's date night, he found himself wanting to create something new. something different. Just think about your bank balance, he murmured to himself as his greedy gaze roved across some English words he was somewhat familiar with, and some that he wasn't. Was that German? French, Well, if it isn't Aizawa-san, and what's this? You're not in your natural habitat or dressed up in that adorable little apron of yours, Blinking out of his thoughts, Shouta regarded the brunette who'd stood at the other end of his cart with a huff. He was wondering when he'd see Mr. Compress again. Awata had warned him a week ago that he'd been doing exceptionally well on his reformation course and had been granted day release. He wasn't allowed within 100 feet of the Noroneko, though. Thank God. Sako-san, he greeted with a little nod, the former fiend grinning widely at him, his admittedly handsome maskless face elated as he clapped his hands together, his tall, elegant form dressed in a simple white cotton button-down and caramel-colored dress pants in linen with matching loafers. "Ah, so you do remember the name?" he preened, his brows waggling jauntily. My, I am flattered. And I'm just thrilled to see you again, too, he thought, his right brow cocking at him. It's kind of hard to forget the person who attempted to abduct me and nearly gave All Might a conniption. He allowed the other having the good sense to look sheepish, a gloved hand rubbing at the back of his neck. Ma, Aizawa-san, you'll have to let me make it up to you, you know, he called before leaning onto the trolley, a smirk tilting his lips. I'm doing very well on my road redemption, he purred out. So well, in fact, that I may start to be allowed out and about of an evening, he furthered. Perhaps you and I could... No. Go out on an evening together, you know, chew the fat a little. Oh, God. Why was this happening? Oh, no, please, I insist, he grinned. Come on, what's the harm,
Sako, there you are.
Letting out a sigh of relief, his mind letting free a prayer of thanks to whichever deity had sent Awata Karoku to save him, her mist-gray eyes never winking hotly as she prowled down the aisle towards them, her beautiful features lighted by a scowl. You're not supposed to go wandering off, let alone bothering civilians, and certainly not making a nuisance of yourself to poor Aizawa-san, especially after all he's done for you. She huffed, her arms folding roughly over her ample bosom. Bothering? Why, Awata, You will address me as Awata-san if you know what's good for you, she grumbled before bowing at him apologetically. I am so sorry, Joe. He hasn't caused you any trouble, has he? Smiling at her fondly, his gaze then moving back to the pouting menace, he allowed himself to chuckle. No trouble, he told her. In fact, he's actually done me a favor, he admitted, the pair blinking at him. I really shouldn't have been tempting myself by walking down here. He snickered before straightening his shoulders to regard the reformed, or close to, anyway, criminal. I'm really glad to see that you're trying your best, Sako-san, he admitted. Keep up the good work and take care of yourself, all right? Being a pro is tough business, but I have a feeling you're going to be great at it, he added, his smile softening when the other bonked at him, his expression bewildered. Oh my Aizawa-san, he gushed, his hands clutching at the fabric over his heart while his bubble girl looked on, her ire having died a little, her smile gentle. I won't let you down, I promise, he stated before giving him a stiff formal bow. And you'll say yes to coming out with me of an evening when I'm successful, right? I didn't mean... the mere thought of it will see me through this trial, this pain, this lonely path I must walk to become a better person, he called dramatically, a few of the other shoppers looking on and whispering to themselves whilst Awata rolled her eyes and he let out another sigh. He seemed to do that a lot around Mr. Compress, didn't he? God, how did he keep getting himself into these situations? Walking back home, the canvas bags for life he'd purchased, bursting with everything he'd been sent out to get, Shouta felt himself wilting a little in the heat. He kept going on and on at the young people he cared about when it came to staying hydrated, and yet here he was, rushing around in these temperatures without having eaten lunch or swallowing a decent drink himself, wasn't he? And now he faced a 15 to 20-minute walk back home, the 6 bags he'd somehow wrangled across his shoulders and in his hands, his palms sweating, weighing heavier with each step he took as he gazed up the slight incline he had to reverse, his heart sinking. Come on, Aizawa, stop being such a baby, he mentally berated. You're getting too pampered with your cushy aircon and creature comforts, aren't you? He mentally upped, his eyes rolling at himself as he continued to trudge. Beep, beep! Nearly jumping out of his skin. He initially turned his head to glower at the prick before, with a blink, he felt his annoyance turn to embarrassment.
Shouta, good afternoon.
And that embarrassment to pure, unadulterated mortification. What the fuck was Toshinori doing here?
Can I give you a ride?
What?
Ma, you look a little red in the face, my friend. Are you all right?
The blonde asked, his car pulling up to the curb.
Yes. I'm fine.
He tried to call through those opened windows, the chill of the other's climate control, like a siren song, but for the life of him, he didn't dare get any closer to the man he'd been unintentionally making a fool of himself in front of.
You don't need to stop on my account, surely.
He added hurriedly, and shit, he was sputtering. He was acting like a moron. He must have sounded like he'd lost his mind, but he really did admire the man who was sweet, kind, and generous to a fault. And the thought of having acted so childishly, and through ignorance too, made him feel like a silly little kid. He normally didn't mind people laughing at him. He was more than happy to laugh at himself, so what had changed? Why did he care so much about making a good impression in front of the broader men?
It's no trouble at all. I was just on my way to the Dollar Liquor, you see.
The other called, his body already out of the car and rounding it.
Oh, perhaps you'd like me to jump you the rest of the way,
What? Was this? Did he mean? Standing on the deserted sidewalk, his peripheral vision picking up the few cars passing by and the hot breeze trying to ruffle his hair, Shouta couldn't help the thundering in his ears, the glow of his cheeks, that weird, awkward feeling in his chest.
Shouta, are you... Whoa there!
So this is what fainting feels like?
I've got you, hold on.
Or was it a swoon?
You can't keep doing this to me. You make me feel like an idiot.
He heard himself say, his eyes rolling.
And I really like you, you know? You big, sappy, dope.
Either way.
What? Shouta, you...
His boys were going to think that this was hilarious.